The opening round of the Six Nations has given us two pretty outstanding, really entertaining games.
Yeah.
And England-Wales.
Yeah.
Traditionally, one of the big rivalries, one of the greatest fixtures in the history of rugby union. One of the oldest, the second oldest fixture, in fact, in rugby union history. And a game that's thrown up, like it had until like 3 or 4 years ago, the tightest contest, I think it still probably is, of any game. Like it's basically 50-50 who won this. And then 2 years in a row now, this has been a complete demolition job from England.
Yeah.
And no one was surprised this year. Last year, people thought Wales might keep it close. This year, no chance.
Yeah. It's a funny one to kind of break down because England just are a lot better than Wales.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't need to be at their best. And the thing that was a bit of a gut punch from a Welsh perspective was England actually didn't use that much of their playbook in this. Sort of after the 20th minute, after kind of that second Arundel try, England just kind of knew that they were in the ascendancy the whole time and didn't have to pull out anything that was different or exceptional, you know? And I think that's a really good position for Borthwick to be in because it means that he's saved back probably a lot of his best cards for future games, you know? And yeah, looking forward, Borthwick will probably look at that and go, yeah, it was a good performance. You know, it could have been better, but, you know, Wales kind of fought back a little bit in the second half.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you know, they got nearly 50 points.
There's an old Sun Tzu maxim, right, from The Art of War, that when your enemy is hurting itself, let them.
Yes.
Right? And there was a lot of that about England's performance. And I think beyond just letting them, England actively went to lengths where they put Wales into situations where they would make errors or they help compound them. Like this maul here, right? David Jenkins is slightly slow to pull out of it. Like he has a chance to get out of this maul. He doesn't immediately get out. So Joe Hayes spots this, comes straight in and pins him in. At this point, right? The moment Hayes is in there, it looks like Dav Jenkins is committing the most cynical act possible. Really what he's done, he was like a second slow to get out there, right? He's now in a situation where the referee has no choice but to penalise him. He gives a warning to Wales, and a moment later, Nicky Smith pulls down the maul as well and gets a yellow card. Then Derry Lake does it a moment later. Wales end up 2 players down, right? But those decisions come from England being really smart and really quick to spot whenever any Welsh player was in a position where they can pin them into the ruck or they can pin them into the maul. Like, Dav Jenkins here is not brilliant work. He has a chance to get out.
It's silly, but like, it's made to look 10 times more silly by Hayes pinning him.
This was the sort of thing England were doing all game long, both with the forward play, with their kicking game in particular, which I thought was a really smart adaptation. Generally, England kick an awful lot contestable. They kicked longer than I've seen them kick for quite a while this game. There's something Steve Borthwick talked about a lot. When he was at Leicester, he had essentially 2 kicking strategies. One was short and contestable, one was long, and they used the longer one where, like, I think it was they played Bayonne in Europe, and Leicester broke the record for most metres kicked ever in a professional rugby game, and they won that game, you know, having sent out a second 15, and he just used that as like an alternative. And we saw a mix this week that I thought was a really smart usage of how they kicked, because they knew, they looked at Wales, right? And Wales came in with a game plan. Dewi Lake said this after the game. We had a game plan, we thought we could get at England, and we could really get into them. And very clearly, that game plan was, we kick an awful lot contestably. We really hang it in the air. We use Ellis Mee. Like Wales' back three selection, which is the 3 best players they have aerially, like the 3 best under the high ball. Ellis Mee getting in above Tom Rogers because he's taller and because he is able to slap that ball back. They set everything up around that. And then 2 things happened, right? One was, England, you look at like this screenshot here, this freeze frame. Look how many white shirts are around this, right? Ellis Mee wins this in the air, and yet there's no Welsh player around to win it back, to take the position. So that happened repeatedly. Every time Ellis Mee would win a ball back in the air, or Josh Adams would win a ball back in the air, England were on it first. Like, I think there was literally one where Adam Beard got to it first, and every other example was an England player being there, immediately following, immediately surrounding.
It's one thing that Wales lack is a Guy Pepper. Yeah. Somebody who is, or a Jamie Ritchie, you know, that sort of player, Francois Cross. That sort of player who is used like an extra winger on kick chase, you know? Somebody who will sweep up the mess. And Wales just don't really have that option in the back row at the moment. You would have maybe hoped that would be Josh McLeod's role, but maybe it was, and just he was beaten at that by the likes of Guy Pepper, you know, who are outstanding at this. You know, you look at when England kick the ball, and like this one, for example, where England don't catch it themselves, Stewart puts a massive hit on Dan Edwards, and Guy Pepper is in straight away just to blast over that breakdown. Guy Pepper cleans this ruck out like it's his own, you know?
Yeah.
He cleans it out like it's his own breakdown to just securing the ball. But in fact, what he's doing is he's blasting through Wales. Wales have to try and like seal off their feet and just do anything to reclaim that ball, and they don't. England managed to turn it over. And I think that's the most encouraging thing for England, what you mentioned there, is the fact that the way they kicked in this game is probably different from every other game they're going to have in the Six Nations, and is different from how they kicked all autumn long. Because they looked at Wales, they identified, we have got a longer kicking game than them. You know, you look at, like, Thomas Williams has a big boot on him, but like Dan Edwards, obviously his boot is fine, you know, but it's not as big as Ford's.
International fly half, no.
Yeah, it's not as big as Ford's, and it's probably not as big as Freddie Stewart's, you know? And so they just knew in kicking battles, like, let's engage them. Let's try and target as many kicking battles as we can. Because Wales, you know, you can see why they did it, because they didn't want to run out of their own half, you know. But they engaged, they humoured these kicking battles, and they knew that Reece Zammit won't be able to bite off as much as George Ford. So they kicked long every time. They looked to get a bounce of the ball. So when Edwards picks it up, he will hit it back, and he'll hit back, as I say, passable kicks. But just 5 metres at a time, it's death by 1,000 cuts at that point, isn't it? They could just push Wales back, and even when Ford is conceding kicking battles and just putting the ball out, you know, they're perfectly camped in the Wales half.
This is the other thing England did really smartly to counter that Welsh game plan, is they just made sure that, yes, Wales received the ball from those kicks, but they were doing it 20 metres further back, right? Meaning that Wales generally kick around 20 to 25 metres on each average kick, hanging up. Meaning that they're receiving the ball back about where they normally would have done if England stuck to their usual strategy. Instead they were kicking longer because they could. Wales' backline, right? Reece Zammit's got a pretty big boot on him. Dan Edwards has got a passable boot on him. Thomas Williams likewise. But that's about it, right? Like, neither of those wingers have huge kicking games on them. You know, both decent enough.
Josh Adams is pretty good, but
but they're not like recognised, proper, reliable kickers.
Not like James Lowe or something like that.
Eddie James can kick the ball, but it's mostly like long grubbers and stuff. He's not like not thinking about it all the time. Yeah, and then Ben Thomas, likewise, reasonable kicker, but like the couple of kicks he did in this game were pretty poor.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into Ben Thomas too much, but like I thought he had a poor game overall.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But that meant that England could get completely on top because they were pushing Wales back, as you say. Sometimes it was 1 metre at a time, sometimes it was 20 or 30. Like, this kicking battle is probably the best example, where you just have Dan Edwards is hitting back as far as he can, and a couple of times he gets in what would be really good shots, right? And like at URC level, he probably gets a bounce here, and he probably like that works out really well. But international level, that's being covered. You've got more people in the backfield, you've got more capable players in the backfield, and it means that he's not getting those bounces, he's not getting the time, and George Ford's pushing them back and pushing them back and pushing them back until eventually, yes, Wales have the ball, but they've lost about 15, 20 metres.
It's really smart the way England do this, because usually what they do on kick return is, and it's a big part of why Freddie Stewart's in the team, is they will either find Stewart or they will find a forward or a winger or somebody to carry the ball who isn't George Ford or Alex Mitchell. They will get them to carry in, then go one phase, and then they will roll it back for the box kick. And that's the way they engage kicking battles. They're like slower, more controlled kicking battles that they like to go in. Whereas in this game, it was, we will catch the ball and we will kick it back. We will put George Ford in the backfield a lot more than we usually do, and we will get him to control all the shots. We will get Freddie Stewart to even kick the ball back, whatever it is. Because as I say, like, they just very gradually squeeze the life out of Wales. And it's not just the territory battle, but also it is just like, it's so demoralising like for Wales that they were trying to engage these kicking battles for what they went into the game thinking was a strength, as I say, with this kicking game, and they're getting absolutely nothing out of it. In fact, they're getting pinned back into their own area.
Exactly.
Like, it's just a huge psychological blow, isn't it?
So you take this, right? And like, the one time this really comes off for Wales, they win a penalty off this one, Elton wins it back in the air. They win the penalty, they go for the corner, Wales get a good position, they're only 3 points behind at this point, which by Welsh standards is basically a 50-point lead at the minute, and they double bank. They get done for that. They then, bam, England put it down and instantly win another penalty, put it down, they're on the try line, Henry Arundel goes over for his first try, right? And this is just like the incredibly frustrating thing about the Welsh performance, because there were so many penalties that were preventable. And I think England did a really good job of nullifying it, to the point where they should have won this game by 20, 30 points, right? And then Wales, one, through lack of confidence, one, for everything that's going on, two, through the size, three, I think Steve Tandy got a lot of his team selection wrong in this, and we'll get onto that a bit later, but particularly on the bench. But then Wales let that first half, it be completely uncompetitive, because England did a brilliant job of nullifying every threat Wales brought, and Borthwick clearly went in knowing and expecting what was happening. Faye Wales pulling out probably helped, because I think Wales was looking to target him in the air.
You can't target Roebuck.
Means that they ended up trying to target Harry Arundel instead, who is much better in the air than he was a few years ago and was pretty fine with the task, like the fairly 50-50 that battle between him and Ellis Mee. That reduced the weapon for Wales because, they can't target Roebuck. So, because he's so good in the air, is the angle there, where Faye Weboso is shorter than both the Welsh wingers.
Yeah, very agile, but you can see why he would try and target him, even if he potentially get nothing out of it.
Yeah. So that took a lot of Wales' own threats away. And at that point, it basically became, and this became the case, like an England training run, right?
Yeah.
And people say that about games against tier 2 nations. But often, that isn't a training run. You're just overpowering a team. And you then get to be in an advantageous game of rugby. This felt like a training run because Wales gave away so many penalties. It allowed England to just reset and do whatever they like. They went, OK, we'll just try a line out now. OK, we'll just try a scrum.
They had maximum reps.
OK, we'll go from
training.
We'll try some phase play, but we know we're coming back in a moment. We know that Richard Wigglesworth's going to blow the whistle and we're going to come back and reset in a moment.
Yeah.
That was how it felt for large chunks of that first half. And Wales picked up a lot and were a lot better in the second half. But that first half, England had nullified every threat Wales brought so much that it became one-sided.
This Henry Arundel try with Ben Thomas's poor pass kind of sums up what Wales are trying to do in attack. So it's a fairly common play, you send it through your 12 and you have somebody coming out the back. Often it's the 10. In this case, it's the fullback, Lewis Rees-Zammit. Now, Ben Thomas here, he is clearly lifting this ball to where he'd expect Dan Edwards would usually be, which is where the ball is here on this still, where it's freeze-framed. Instead, what Lewis Rees-Zammit does is he tries to cheat a little bit. He tries to steal a couple of extra yards. And I can see why he does that, because he's fast. He wants to get out onto the outside early. So he starts pretty much already behind Eddie James at this stage. And instead, the ball goes completely in behind him. It's a really poor pass by Ben Thomas, who I guess doesn't look up and see where Zammit actually physically is. And the ball goes to the floor. Fraser Dingwall, very quick to react. Brilliant timing of the pass. I love that he just gave this straight away as well.
Yeah.
And Arundel scores really easily. And that Welsh attack really struggled to get going.
I mean, this is probably the best example of it for me. It's just terrible, right? This is terrible. Wales have got a rare example of gain line ball. They're going forward. They're in a moment of attack. So Dan Edwards thinks, OK, we can play. We can attack here. Now, Dan Edwards generally plays his best rugby when he's got enough playmaker alongside him. I wonder if that's why they put Ben Thomas in the team, why they thought about that. But Ben Thomas makes a terrible call here to bring the ball out. So the ball comes out. It goes behind to Dan Edwards. And at this point, every deceptive player for Wales, every dummy runner has already gone in front of the ball. So it's so easy. Dan Edwards throws the pass on to Ben Thomas, and Thomas suddenly has no options in front of him. The only thing that's on is the cross kick. He hasn't spotted that because he has the time to put it in.
Which is so weird because he's deep enough that you expect that's what he's going for.
If he calls that out, you think he's going for the cross kick because it's the only thing that's on, right? Everything else is marked up. Instead, he kind of hovers and hangs about, and they get nailed behind the gain line. And Wales go from having gained territory a moment earlier to now having lost 15, 20 metres, and they end up just kicking it away in a moment. And this became, I think, systematic of the whole Welsh game, is so often their attack has a couple of dummy runners, but they're being used really badly. Yeah. And you compare that to England, and you look at particularly the Ben Earl try, right? And the way you've got players flooding through and making sure that they're engaging Welsh defenders the entire time, and even when the ball is behind them, they're running realistic lines where someone could get ahead of them and pop it off on their shoulder, or they're just getting physically in the way of players floating across, meaning they can't drift in time to get across to Ben Earl eventually on the outside.
That Ben Earl try is the perfect example of this, because look how synchronised this England pack are, how quick they are to just change their formation on the fly.
It's so Blackett.
They've found a bit of a four here, I guess they're playing a 1-3-2-2 system, and the twos have kind of ended up a bit mangled together as a four. So Jamie George offers something else, and he kind of splinters off to go onto Dingwall's inside here. Just, again, he's not really much of an option, but he is physically there. Yeah. Wales have to mark him. Then Chesham and Genge motor forward. And at this point, this is where it gets clever. Joe Hayes doesn't. Joe Hayes pulls back. He knows that Freddie Stewart's coming into this attack somewhere. Joe Hayes calls off and remains an option for Dingwall. So at that point, these two have already drawn in enough players, Chesham and Genge. Joe Hayes can then do the same thing again. He can reset on somebody else because Freddie Stewart has started pretty much in behind forward and worked all the way around onto that outside so he can just square up on Ellis Mee. And because Joe Hayes has run that hard line, it's brilliant. He managed to tie a man in. Mee is the last man. Stewart can square him up and put Ben Earl away on the left-hand side. If you then compare that to the synchronisation of the centres on that previous example for Wales, you just think, and this is the centres, not the forward pack, Eddie James has no idea what Ben Thomas is trying to call him.
No.
He has stood incredibly flat compared to Ben Thomas, who's really deep, and again, you can see why he's doing that, because clearly he spotted something, he wants to go for either a long pass or a kick or something, right?
Yeah.
Eddie James is really flat on him. They are clearly not on the same page here. No. And I know Eddie James isn't Jonathan Davis, right? And I know that they've not moved on from him. But you can remember there was a time when Wales would, if they've called it out and it's clearly not on, it's fine, because Jonathan Davis would be maybe starting on the 10-metre line here and motoring onto that ball, accelerating, and he can at least just get them, even if not over the gain line, just 5 metres further forward so they can reset their attack from there. Yeah. Instead, Eddie James clearly doesn't know what line is being asked of him at this point.
There's a lack of understanding and a lack of clarity.
Yeah.
These two have played, I think, once, maybe twice together before, which becomes a bit of an issue. You don't have that kind of like Jamie Roberts and Jonathan Davis
that chemistry,
thing.
yeah.
But likewise, right, England cheated this by picking a centre combo who play together at club level.
Yeah.
Wales have available to them, they could have picked Eddie James and Joe Hawkins to play together at club level, or Joe Hawkins and Owen Watkin, who used to play together at club level. Like, those are established combinations they could have selected, and they didn't opt for either of them.
Yeah.
Instead, they went for this kind of disjointed unit. But I do want to, and I don't mean to go in on Eddie James, because I think he's a very good player, and I think he's a perfectly good game.
I think he justifies being in this team.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a couple of examples where England got around Wales way too easily, because if there is a work on for Eddie James, right, or perhaps an area where he falls behind Owen Watkin as the potentially other option for the Welsh team jersey, it is his organisation in defence. And you look at like the Tom Roebuck try, right? This comes from, it's a really simple situation. England work out, set play towards this line, they bit deception, good set play, gets them over the gain line, gets them going forward, Wales just about cover it, they scramble, they get into position, right? Now, very good chance, if none of this happens, England just drive over anyway, right? They have Bevan, Rob picks and goes and they get over, whatever it is. However, Dan Edds and Thomas Williams fill in on the blind side. That's fine, that's a decent place to have your half-backs. They've only got one threat on that side really, so they're just watching there just in case. But you have Josh Adams has worked in here, in field, into position, because it was a scramble situation, because he was trying to get back in a kind of fullback style. Likewise, Louis Zamet. And both of them remain here. You need Josh Adams, maybe he bounces out, maybe he stays in for a second longer because the forwards are setting there, but he needs to get back to his wing, and Rhys Zamet in particular is providing nothing here. Absolutely no threat. Part of this is he's not used to playing fullback, right? Especially not in this Welsh system, so he's not used to, okay, I need to bounce back out. But the other side of this is Eddie James doesn't call anyone across. Like, in this situation, it's the thing we see Owen Watkin do. Like, if you watch him play like live for the Ospreys, he is constantly talking, constantly moving players about, constantly moving like his pack around and his forwards and like getting him in position. He's like a really good defensive leader. And you just need a player like that, like Fraser Dingwall does for England. Get everyone in position, get them working, get them round there, and this was a problem for Wales. You look again at the first Arundel try, and it's a really similar situation. Just off the first set piece, they've put Ellis Mee on Dan Ed's inside, just because he's a bigger man, helps him out when inevitably everyone targets the 10 off first phase, so they just want someone bigger with him there. They go in, they crash ball. Ellis Mee, through sheer pressure, is forced to flood inside. He makes a tackle. He gets held up, kind of pinned in, again by England. Really smart, just like seeing a moment of weakness, not rolling away quickly enough. He's not used to being in the situation. He's not used to making tackles between the posts. He's a winger, right? So they smash him over the ball, they pin him in, gives him a penalty. As England set up to tap, he jogs back in just to get back into the line, and he never works back out to his wing. He stays in that position, and it means the space is open always for England to put it over the top and Arundel to score in the corner. Thomas Williams is left doing everything on his wing alone. And Wales is just like, their backline were never setting up to defend properly. Like, so often we saw wingers and fullbacks being dragged into situations where part of the system, part of the Tandy thing that we saw him do with Scotland, they want those players jamming in and filling spare gaps, as they do with the scrum half as well. And yet none of them were bouncing back out into position because no one was organising this. Wales was so unorganised in defence.
And you contrast that on both of those examples with what England do in attack. With the Roebuck try, where, as you mentioned, Rhys Zamet is just kind of in no man's land a little bit here, not come out. And I say this as like, Rhys Zamet was by a stretch Wales' best player.
He was very good
on the day.
Yeah.
But if you contrast that with how early, like Tom Roebuck's work rate here is outstanding. Yeah. As soon as he's tackled, he's presented the ball, and the ball's been played away again. Look at him, he's straight back to his feet, and he's working around. England don't actually need an extra man in the attack. They've already got 4 men over, and yet he provides that as an extra option, because, what if Wales fly up in defence? What if they need an extra bailout option, just somebody to dump off, which is exactly what happens. And then he runs that line, and he scores over there. He just beats both Rhys Zamet and Adams into that space. Yeah. Exactly the same for that Arundel try you mentioned as well. Look at Tom Roebuck again. Like, Wales have no wingers on this side. England have 2.
Yeah.
Tom Roebuck just runs. He runs that just a short little jump-off line off George Ford, just in case he wants to lift it. all it does is it just sucks in one defender. It just shortens them a little bit. George Ford instead goes across the face, which means that Arundel gets a free run at the try line, you know? And Tom Roebuck's sheer work rate on both of those opportunities just creates that extra man where Wales are potentially lacking that winger in defence.
If there's one thing you're most impressed with by this England team, especially in that performance, it's their organisation.
Yeah.
If there's a second thing, it's their work rate.
Yeah.
And consistently, they were getting into situations and getting into positions where you couldn't do anything about it because they just beat Wales to that space consistently, and they knew every part of their system. And a part of that is helped by the fact their coaching team's been in for 3 years, where Wales has been in for 3 games, 5 games now, but, like all the same. There's only so much you can do in that period of time. But Wales had a lot of, clear lack of clarity on their roles, a lot of inaccuracy. The penalty count was insane. Equalled Wales' record for most yellow cards in one game ever.
That's mad.
4 yellow cards. I don't know why, when the discipline's going badly, you bring on Tame Plumtree.
It's a choice.
Yeah, 6 yellow cards this season so far in something like 12 games.
Yeah.
And yellow cards in his...
He's great with the ball, but it's not worth it.
I checked this, right? 3 consecutive tests. I couldn't think of anyone else who's ever done that. 3 yellow cards in a row. Thomas Lavanini only ever got 2.
Wow.
Admittedly, one of those games he got 2 yellow cards and did get a red on top of that.
Fair.
So he did pick up as many cards in 3 games, but he still never made it 3 games in a row.
That's an interesting one.
Wales' discipline, if they can sort that out, I think they can make things more consistent. I feel better about this game for watching it a second time and going through it again this morning.
Yeah.
And working out, actually, there are areas where I think Wales just got things wrong rather than just being raw, not in the game, which is how it felt watching it live. I was just like, they're not competitive. They're not able to keep up with what England are doing. Obviously, England are further ahead and we're always going to win this game, but there was so much less in it than I expected. And it was so much less last year was everything went perfectly for England, right? That was a brilliant, exceptional England performance. This was a perfectly fine performance.
Yeah.
It was telling that George Ford came out in his post-match interview. His overwhelming emotion was frustration. He's obviously pleased with the result, but really frustrated with the way that game went.
Especially because that second half where Wales did hang in there, and you could tell they were really. It sounds fucking stupid and patronising, but you could tell they were really trying to keep that score down and to frustrate England.
Wales had 2 or 3 good defensive sets in the second half, which didn't feel like given in the first half because they didn't. Yeah. And then there's a couple of England tries though, Tommy Freeman absolutely pushes this. This should be a walk-in for Ben Spencer, but instead it isn't. And there's a few like that where you're Wales got out of jail there because England did something daft.
Yeah.
And I think actually it's probably a good thing for Steve Borthwick to have a comprehensive win, and yet to be in the situation where they still have a lot of work on and a lot they can put right over the next few weeks because they've got quite a kind of entry into the tournament. They should beat Scotland next week. Yeah. Though Scotland are Scotland, it is at Murrayfield and they don't have a good record there at all. They won there, once in the last 6-7 years. I feel better about this from a Welsh perspective for watching it a second time. Not as much better as I did for watching Mamma Mia straight after the game, which did help an awful lot. And I recommend, in future, maybe the sequel would do it next week against France. But I think there's areas where Wales can put right and fix, and I think the Welsh bench was a bit of a problem because they provided no impact. Where you look at that England bench, who came on, Borthwick brought them on at smart times. All of them came on and added something. Where that Welsh bench was just worse versions of the starting 15. And yes, he went 6-2 to try and keep the energy up, but there was no one bringing any impact there.
Yeah, it was a struggle. It was a real struggle, and also not having a fly half on the bench, I think, didn't help things as well.
And look, Liam Belcher and Ben Carter have been playing well at club level, right? But are you telling me you're better bringing them on than Ryan Elias and Rhys Davies, who are much bigger men, more physical, will change what England are having to defend? There's a few things like that from a Welsh perspective, not to get too focused on them. But I thought England was just very good, right? And there's almost very little you can say about the English performance because they just did the thing that they do.
Yeah.
Right? As I said, it was
they just are a better team.
Yeah, they were just
by a long way,
right? And yes, you can pull out the individual tries and you can look at them, but
again, they're not giving anything away,
no.
And I think that's another great thing for Borthwick is if you're playing England the next couple of weeks, that's not a game where you can really pull up much and go, oh, this is what we need to target. Yeah. Because they've not given it away.
Yeah. Would you rather be after this opening round England or France as the 2 contenders? Really?
Oh, I guess probably England because they've cruised to a 48-point win and not had to pull anything big out. So I suppose it's quite nice that for them that they could have quite a steady start to the tournament.
I think so.
Build from here.
If you're Galtier, it's quite hard to go, do that again, lads. Because they pretty much got 90% of things right against Ireland, and there's a couple of things they can clean up. around that kind of 7-8 minute period where Ireland got back in the game. But England were messy and yet winning by, I think it was the 4th biggest margin they've ever beaten Wales by. No, I think the 3rd, sorry. Steve Borthwick, right? He's probably looking at that performance and he's going, yeah, there's a lot we can fix. And yet they won by 41 points. And yet they beat one of their oldest enemies and they played fine.
Yeah.
That was like a 7 out of 10 England performance, you know, maybe a 6.
They'll be very satisfied with that.
Yeah, maybe 7 first half, 6 second half, and they won very comprehensively. They'll be very happy with how that started, frankly, if I was Steve Borthwick. Like, you want things to fix. You want to be able to come in and go, that was sloppy, lads. Let's get this right. Let's improve for next week. We've got to be better at Murrayfield, where Scotland always come out really pumped up.
Again, it's a good training session, isn't it?
From there.
It's like a Red Roses game.
Yeah,
you know?
It felt like a Red Roses game. That is exactly it.
Wales, on the other hand, it's very easy to look and kind of go like, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And much like Mamma Mia, I look at the fact they've got France next week, and my first thought is, here we go again.
My. Yeah. The thing is, right, and out the game I was like, the thing is, are there people you can bring in and change this? Is there anything you can do?
Can you
to
take
really
a chance
change
on
this?
any of the players?
Yeah. Winner takes it all at the end of the tournament.
It's good. It's good.
So the thing is, actually, I think there are ways you can reinforce this Welsh team. Like, there are ways you can, you know, whether it is putting Rhys Davies on the bench, having a bit of impact there, whether it is putting Owen Watkin in and just having someone experienced in the back line, because, like, I felt for Dan Edwards an awful lot. Like, I don't think that was his best game. He looked much less confident just for the Ospreys. And I think a lot of that, right, is the fact that he was being asked to do everything himself. Like, he was the one real leader in that back line. And he's used to having Owen Watkin alongside him, who is experienced international, and Jack Walsh is another playmaker.
Yeah.
And he didn't have any of that, and he was left to do everything on his own. And I think you just try and reinforce that team and try and put some protection around him a little bit.
Yeah.
And also bring Sam Costello on the bench.
Yes.
I think Wales would have benefited more from having Sam Costello come on and change the picture in attack.
Exactly. Somebody who's offered something slightly different.
Yeah. Than they would have from having Ben Carter come on and make 6 more tackles than, you know, Adam Beard would have made in that time. Like, you know.
All I'm saying is they need Angus O'Brien in at fullback. And
that's always the answer. It's Angus O'Brien and Kieran Williams will solve all these problems for Wales. Yeah. They have the best player in the world waiting at the Dragons, and he is Angus O'Brien.
Well, the only other pun I can think of is gimme Alex Mann after midnight.
That's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty good.
And I'm running out of ways to wrap this video up. But Wales is sad to support them, isn't it?
It's not been much fun. England roll on, though. England, very solid, head to Murrayfield next week, and they should win that. We'll talk about that game later in the week. We'll talk about Scotland versus Italy likely tomorrow. But you're right, we've got to watch Wales 4 more times, haven't we?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that was the first game of a whole tournament rather than just a one-off test match. And that was kind of the worst bit of the game for me.
They do get the 2 best teams out of the way, though. Like, it gets easier from there. Yeah. Like, it's next week is like, then there's like a more entertaining game against Scotland. Then there's the best week, which is the break week, and
we might not lose that one.
Last 2, yeah.
Well, yeah. Wales could still win the tournament though, so take the positives.
True. It is actually true.